So my name is John Cutler. I have a background in product management and UX across a couple different companies. I like to write about product a lot. And I've had the benefit over, my role prior to my current role, I had the benefit of meeting hundreds and hundreds of teams, which was great. I worked at a company called Amplitude, and my role was to kind of go out and work with customers. So I might have worked with some of I saw some FanDuel people. There's some folks who I've probably worked with or done workshops with. And in my new role, I flipped the script, and now I sort of serve a 1,000-person plus product organization at a company called Toast, which does point-of-sale things. It's massive scale, but internally, as opposed to externally. Very excited to be speaking with you today. First activity of the day, take out your phone. I want you to look at your work calendar. This is going to be stressful. It's purposely stressful. So take it out, and I want you to check your work calendar and answer a couple questions. I want to look at your meetings, maybe for last week or next week. Look at all the scheduled time blocks that you have, your regular meetings. I want you to look at how you spend the first 60 minutes, caffeinated minutes of the day, your power hour. So check that out. Some of you don't need to look. You probably have it burned into your head. And I want to imagine that I'm an alien, or I'm John, and I come and visit you, and what will I determine that your company prioritizes? What do you value? What does your company value, looking at your calendar? Anyone? Bureaucracy. What else? Customers. That's a good one. What else? Money. Oh, learning. Same thing. Learning and money are the same things now anyway. Okay, great. Okay, next experiment. So I call these the New Year's product resolutions. So these are the things that it's December, you're like, things are going to completely change next year. We're going to operate in these new ways. We're going to use these new documents. We're going to do all these new workshops. And I want you to imagine those, and then we all know what happens to New Year's resolutions, right? These are the things that sort of fade away. It's May or June. They're like the sad Miro boards that no one ever looks. They're like the trees falling in a forest, or the documents that no one ever updated, or that spreadsheet where we're all going to put in our things in there, and no one ever looks at those particular things. So these are your New Year's product resolutions. You don't need to shout those out because they're too embarrassing, but I want you to keep those in your head as we go through this as well. Okay, final task. I want you to think about your zombie habits. So these are the things in your company, just no one knows why you do them anymore. You've been showing up at that meeting for 3 years, and you're just like, I still don't know why I'm here. Your brain is completely turned off while you're in this particular meeting. You're kind of in execution mode. You're just going through the motions. You turn around at the end of each quarter and you sort of wonder where your time went. You're in these zombie habits. So I want you to reflect on your zombie habits for a second. Anyone have a good example of a zombie? You don't need to think it. You could just project it to me with thought if you want. Okay, I got that one too. I have a lot of these meetings. Frankly, we all have all these meetings. Okay, so we've gone through some zombie habits. We've gone through your New Year's product resolutions that don't go anywhere. And we looked at your calendar, and the aliens say that you either prioritize customers or bureaucracy. Okay, where am I going with this, and what's the purpose of today's talk? If you have wandered into this place called LinkedIn recently or Twitter, you all know that we are absolutely swimming in frameworks. In fact, anyone with Miro is a framework creator. You see them everywhere. It's like a mosaic on LinkedIn, and we're drowning in these frameworks. We're drowning in this product advice. We're drowning in all this knowledge of all the stuff that we're supposed to apply in our particular company. Yet, my hypothesis is that very, very, very little of it translates into anything actionable in your companies. It's not translated into doing. And when you look at successful product teams, and maybe within your company, or if you've seen lots of teams, what actually defines product teams are not the frameworks they use, but it is the habits. It's the things that they do regularly, that they apply their energy to, they apply their brain to, that defines teams for good and bad, right? To mention those back in those zombie habits, but other things. A couple key habits probably define your whole teams. You've probably listened to podcasts and you'll hear that one little nugget where they say, there's recently a podcast where someone said at Stripe, every manager tries to deploy against the API. So that's like that one little habit. Or maybe you work at, who requires product managers to like sit in a support queue for a little bit once in a while? Anyone? Okay, so one person, right? So these are these habits that like 1 out of 100 companies have, or 1 out of 20 companies have. So there's all sorts of different versions of these, and you might use them. But my theory here is that it's those habits that define companies, not necessarily the 100 different frameworks that we have at our disposal. So here's my current inspiration. You know, my current job is I'm in the habit business. And I have data on 1,000 people. So I'm the person who sits there and I'm watching them try to adopt new habits, like, oh, we're going to try to up-level our work this way. I'm watching them trying to kill old habits. We're going to stop doing this. In some cases, I'm trying to make everyone do something. I'm trying to make 1,000 people do a particular thing. And the inspiration for this talk is just observing how powerful these habits are in our day-to-day work, and also how challenging it is to create new habits, no matter how, you know, you've been on LinkedIn and you say, that's a good idea. There's a huge delta between that being a good idea and then in the next coming weeks actually putting it in motion into your company. So I've been observing the power of habits over words at a sort of very, very large scale at my company, and this is why I became fascinated in this topic. I don't have a belt. I lost all my clothes, and I bought everything yesterday, except I did not buy a belt, so apologies for that. Okay, so in this talk, we're going to do a brief thing, you know, what are habits in general? We're not going to do that. You know, there's books like Atomic Habits by James Clear or B.J. Fogg. In the hustle culture, we know about habits. You can learn about habits all day. There's a lot of stuff there. So we'll go briefly into what habits are. And then we'll talk about 5 habits that I believe every product team should have. And you'll make excuses why you already do it and don't, but I'm just going to reiterate that. And then we'll end by talking about some obstacles that show up and how to get around those particular obstacles. So my goal for the end of today is we're going to actually do this ritualistic thing at the end just to prepare for, where I'm going to ask you to delete a standing meeting. And then we're going to celebrate and clap. So I'm just seeding that in your brain right now to create the cue so that the habit will come true. So I'm going to say delete it, and then so start fiddling with your phone and finding that meeting. But I'm just seeding what we're going to do at the end. It will be a great way to finish the day, is deleting a meeting to do this thing. All right. So what is a habit? There's lots of definitions for habits. One is you could think about it as an automatic script that gets turned on by a cue. So I give you a cue, and then you are going to do a certain set of things in a certain order. Another definition of a habit is sort of the neurological one, which is when a habit's in place, there are certain neurons that are firing in your brain, that they're closer together, it's a well-worn path in your brain, there's a little less load to get into the habit, and that's another good definition. But for today, I'm going to keep it super practical. You know, habits are regular activities, they're more ingrained, they're just how we work. In a particular company, and they do feel like muscle memory. They're things that you do without a big load to get started. That's sort of my definition of habits. It's probably not the proper one, but for today's thing, we're talking about product habits. I'm going to talk about the things we just do, and that's why we do them. Very importantly, habits fit into a stack of other things. And so you can think about this stack. It's like knowledge, skills, motivation, habits, and environment. All these things work together to improve performance in your company. But here's the fascinating thing. The LinkedIn posts, all those frameworks, that's just knowledge. That's just the thing. But really, at the end of the day, knowledge and skills tend to only be about 20 to 30% of the big picture of performance when they've done this research on it. This is why habits are so important, because you could think about habits as the catalyst for practice, which is how you develop skills. So habits times practice equals skills. You can also think as habits as lowering the motivation load to do something. When you've developed a habit, you don't go to bed each night and say, I gotta motivate to brush my teeth and spend 10 minutes. You just do it because it's a habit, and you don't really need to necessarily be motivated to do it. And if culture is what you do, not what you say, and habits are often what we do automatically, they are your environment as well. So if you work in an environment where people routinely talk down on people or say that that's not a good idea, that's a habit that's getting that thing. So they also control our culture and how we're working. The final point, and we got to this a little bit earlier, is a lot of the habits we have are just automatic, and we do the script without really thinking. I would argue here that what I'm talking about are turned on habits. So maybe starting them is easy. You know, to give you an example, if you do support and every PM sits in the support queue, after they've done it a couple times, you don't need to nudge them and kick them through the door and doing it. They're just going to do it more automatically. But when they're on the support queue, they're not sitting there in like a mindless state. You know, they're picking up information. So as we go through the particular examples, I want you to keep that in mind, that we're talking about things that are both easy to start, but not mindless while you're doing that as we're going through these things. Cool. All right, let's get to it. And here are the habits. Boom. Okay. You go and you ask product managers what habit is most important. They're going to say, talk to customers. Customer centricity, this is important. But talking to customers is the like, yeah, I work out, or yeah, I go to the gym of product. It's like, oh, do you work out? Yeah, I work out. Yeah, do you go to the gym? Yeah, I kind of do that. But when you actually talk to teams and you ask them, you know, are you interacting with customers? Yeah, I'm doing that. All the time? Yeah, you know, when I can. Are you processing any of that information and turning it into things you can? Yeah, I take some notes sometimes. Doing that thing, you kind of go down the stack. Can you trace any decisions to when you actually talk to the customer? Well, you know, I have a UX researcher who sometimes does that. They're pretty good at it. I'm just generally just scoping things out. I make fun of product managers a lot because I work with them a lot. But that's generally what a product manager will do. Is the I go to the gym of product. But it is absolutely the most important habit that you're doing. So here's a picture of a team that I worked on. And I love this picture for a couple reasons, because it demonstrates a couple of the key things about what I'm talking about developing that habit of connecting with customers. This is a team of engineers and one designer, and we are on site visiting a customer. Notice everyone is listening intently. They are watching someone do the work in their particular environment, right? This is not a passive conversation. This is not everyone kind of listen to some Loom calls. I mean, Loom and Gong are great, but you get, it'd be Gong, not Loom. So you get the idea, right? This is active processing. Now, the second picture is the team immediately taking that feedback and processing through it. It's synthesizing this particular information. They're doing some mock-ups and some drawing exercises, not to design the product, and none of them would claim to be a designer, but they're doing it to process what they just heard and turn it into artifacts that they can just use. So that level of active listening, the note-taking you see, the processing, the synthesizing, connecting to decisions, that's the habit at a high level. Now, how do teams do it? So how do teams I work with do it? So here's some examples of habits that we have in our particular environment. PM number 1, they set themselves 4 times a week minimum. I'm going to do an active research call where I'm taking that particular information, I'm synthesizing it, I'm boiling it down. Team 2, a whole team research session. They commit to a whole team, engineers and designers and PMs, at least once a week for 1 hour to listen to a couple customers. Team number 3, they do the fly on the wall sessions. A lot of the problem is if you're a product manager, someone in sales will say, can you just show up on the call? What that means, translation is, can you show up and don't say anything wrong? And then when I need you to sell the product, I'm going to cue it over to you, and then you're going to be the fancy product. So no, they committed to real fly on the wall sessions, which is I'm listening, I'm observing, I'm processing feedback as we're working. A lot of people in B2C don't have the benefit necessarily of walking out and seeing a representative customer, but another team, we have lots of different teams in my company, so there are examples of B2C as well, a real commitment to listen to the voice of customer stuff. So 3 times a week, 30 minutes each, processing that VOC feedback. And then the final thing is a co-synthesis session. Extremely powerful, not just the PM saying, I'll just process the notes, but it's 2 people looking through the notes together and synthesizing it. So I'm giving you a real habit. So think which one you're going to do next week and which one you do already. Awesome. Okay, you got that in your mind. Next one, the next habit. If you've ever been on a team like this, you know exactly how it feels like. It feels like walking into the fog-ridden abyss. They've probably been eating their own flesh for months as they go through, and somewhere in the distance, and if you work in a company that has like that one slide with the 3 strategic pillars on it, And it's still in May, and people are like, I don't know what the fuck those mean anymore. Like, I get them, but this is just marketecture. It's just no one gets it. This is what it feels like to be on this thing. We've all been there at a certain point. So what is this habit and how are we to relate to this? So I broke down being a product manager into these two routines. One is called narrative. So we can instantiate narrative. And the other one is refining the narratives. This is the code for being on a product team, the pseudocode. But what this is about is if you are any kind of product developer, you're in the narrative shaping, coherence checking, coherence resolving, storytelling business. Every day. Every day you are refining that story from the stuff you're working on right now at the smallest level all the way to like why the company exists, what you're doing for your customers, how you're going to up-level the team, how you're going to up-level the lives of your customers. You're doing it to all levels all at once. You're doing it from the CEO down to the people on your team. And importantly, to the second function there, you're narrative checking at all times. So when things feel off, you're in that thing and you talk about it and people are like, well, I don't really get the strategy. You're going back to the drawing board and you're thinking about what's off here. What am I not getting? So you're always doing that coherence checking as you're working. So that's the high-level habit. You have to run these routines over and over and over and over again. So what does it look like to do this? If you're in the product management business, part of this, I believe, is writing. So specific examples from teams. 3 times a week, 30-minute writing session where PM just writes and they carve out the coffee time to make sure they're doing that narrative and getting it down. The second thing, we have teams that are maintaining a risk and assumption log that they commit to go back to every 2 weeks. So let's say you had an assumption that the customer world looked like this. The new data, now your priors have changed. Now you calibrate your assumptions based on that. Third one is called the 150 word to 3,000 word thing that every PM should be able to do, which is 150 words is 1 minute. 3,000 words is like 20 minutes or something. You have to be able to go up and down that stack like that. In any situation, in any hallway to do this. This takes a lot of practice and a lot of habit. So you have teams kind of committing to that particular narrative. The elevator pitch thing is you never know when someone's going to be like, the thing about being a PM is if you're down low level, they'll ask you to go high level. If you're high level, they'll ask you to go low level. If you're in the middle, they'll ask you to go high level, low level. If you're kind of mid to low level, they'll ask you to go mid to high level. If you're mid to high level, they'll ask you to go super 30,000 feet and then go, like you've never won. So you have to practice this narrative over and over again. And then the final habit is just, we've got some teams working on this now, is just the rolling 12-month honest roadmap. You always have the roadmap done. It's not a performative activity to like, okay, everyone, time to get your roadmaps in. We just make sure that it is a habit, revising that all the time. I'm presenting real-world habits so you can see real-world product and how people do this. The next habit. So I do believe that a bias to action is an important habit for any product team. The problem is the way that many people interpret a bias to action is, I just need to make the team ship faster. So it's this idea that a lot of product managers have that their job is to somehow eke out the most amount of output from the particular teams that they work. This has gotten even worse, by the way, with the economy and when finance starts asking questions. This all gets bad. But I do think there is a kernel here that's important, that if you're involved in this, you need to figure out how to encourage a bias to action on your team. That is the habit. Action is the habit that you want. But you can't be in the business of pushing the team or getting them to ship. That starts to get these anti-patterns coming up. Here's the analogy that I use in my coaching or my work, and that is of a river with stepping stones. And I think that this is a very, very good analogy for what you're trying to get the team to do. You're trying to create an environment where there is a collective bias for action. And you notice here, they know where they want to go. They want to get across the river. That much is known. You know where you are. You're in the starting point. But it is not one path across that river. There's a series of stones across the river. You see them kind of doubling back. You get to some wrong steps. Part of the environment you're trying to create as a product manager is an environment where it is safe to make the steps. That's what you're trying to do, and it's safe to walk back. What you realize is that most teams are hesitant about action when they feel they'll never be able to reverse their steps. They're scared, as you are when you're a river. If you think you'll never be able to walk backwards, you're going to be very, very worried about your first step. So the lever here, the habit you're trying to get with your team is to get that safe action, safe forward momentum, so you continue to learn and you continue to do. You see how these habits are related. So what are the specific actions that you can do, the specific habits? I love this one from a PM. They work with their designer PM and engineering leads. They call it like their no-spin weekly appraisal, which is the no bullshit appraisal of where you are at. If nothing happened, that's what they encourage people to think about. And the no spin part's important because once you start creating that spin, it gets very difficult. The next one is extremely important in this remote world is, a PM said, I block out 30 minutes a day, unstructured time that I will always be available for those questions that come up. And this is important. If you have to get on someone's calendar 3 or 4 days from now to answer a basic question, or you need to ask, in Slack when someone's so stressed and they write their question and you can see that the other person's super busy, they respond with one line like, I don't know. Setting aside this time for synchronous review, super important. The next thing, back to that point about safety, the operating assumptions part is important. The habit there is continuously going back to revise the operating assumptions so that the team feels safe to take those steps. If they can see that you've done that and see that you're revising it, they feel more likely to be able to do it. And then finally, just figuring out the working agreements. This is very basic, but if a team is worried they will never be able to go back and iterate, just making an agreement with the team that, yes, we will go back and iterate can go a super long way. So those 4 things are habits that you can do. This is one of my favorite ones. I don't know if when you looked at your calendar, if you were to break down the time you spent doing your roadmaps, your annual plans, your estimates, your designs, your backlog, and you compare that to actually thinking about what happened. In most companies, I think this would actually be a generous interpretation. The ratio is way, 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 way off. The amount of time spending talking about what you're going to do and how long what you're going to do is going to take and the designs and things that you're going to do or what the status is, the watermelon charts are of the things you're doing, compared to what actually happened and what is the impact of the thing. And this is a super habit for product managers and basically the whole team of leveling these together, is just get some balance here and close the loop. What's very important here is this doesn't matter if it's for your company or for your own career. Having sat in now dozens and dozens of interviews in the last couple weeks, when a PM says, and at that job, I created the roadmap, you don't listen very much, right? What you're listening for is, here's what we observed, here was the insight, this is what we tried, this is what happened, and this is what we did next. That's what you're listening for. So this is beyond just at your current company. If you can combine, if you can get this muscle going on your right, I guess, this is a huge level up for your particular team, is just closing the loop. This is how you get better decision quality at your team. One mistake that happens is I think we've used this word product sense and product mindset as these mythical things, high agency, high product sense, mindset genius. It's not genius, it's reps. It's just reps. It's like why firemen know that there's going to be a backdraft. It's like they just have the priors to know, I think we're getting into a sticky situation here. That's what I'm going to do. So you have to create the reps for yourself. So what are specific things you can do? So I think everyone generally knows, well, you should do product reviews. And I think, I don't know, whose teams do product reviews at the moment, looking retroactively to the past versus the what are we going to ship next week? Anyone? See, ooh. Okay, good, I'm speaking to the right crowd. So this is the thing. I'm sure you have some dumbass company meeting that no one's actually getting any value out of. And in that same hour, you could be talking about the decisions you made in the last month and reflecting on what did we observe, what were our insights, what did we try, what happened, and what was our next step. It's painless, but you need to make it painless, right? You need to create a safe environment where that is not frowned upon. One tip here is if you only do this every quarter, if you do it around promo time, guess what? Not very safe, right? But if you make a regular habit of it, it's better. The other thing is you can hijack existing meetings to do this, and this is one of the main tips here. You don't need to ask permission for anyone in your company to do this. Just start the meeting and say, hey, before we jump in, I wanted us all to reflect on that thing we shipped last month. It's not what we expected to do. And no, you're not going to get fired for that. People might look at you kind of funny, like, why are they doing it? But if you spend 3 minutes doing that, no one's going to, sweat the things. Another thing that's super interesting that people underestimate, I worked at Amplitude and people underuse this particular feature, is just making it easier. Like if you have to go into a product, click on a thing, click on the dashboard and look at the data, most people won't do it. But I found even from my own work at Amplitude, if you create the chart and then you create the email notification and you create the trigger and you just get it into your email, you check it. So don't underestimate the value. Not all habits are created by having to change a lot of things up. Some can just be by hijacking existing things like email or a Slack thread to say, hey, we hit 1,000 actives or something like that. And the products are so easy to use now with Slack and between those things. There's no excuse that people don't have channels where they see some update on a metric that they're interested in doing. No peeking, though. No peeking if you're doing your A/B tests, I guess. Cool. So those are specific things. The final habit. The final habit is about celebration. And there's a story here. I did an activity with a team recently, a scavenger hunt. And we went through, I said, let's retell the story of the last year. And it was incredible. They went back and they said, we never celebrated any of this. We didn't have fun. There was always the next thing. It was always the next thing, the next project, the next thing. And it was kind of a big moment for the team that said, damn it, like we did a really good job this year. They were really hard on themselves. But what you notice, especially in a remote world where people are all business in all meetings all the time, you tend to get a lack of celebration. Celebrating real progress makes up for all the setbacks that you have. And I'm talking about real celebration, like guttural, laughing, savoring the progress, being in the moment things, not like the success theater stuff, because everyone writes the email that's like, things are going great. And if you work on that effort, you're like, things are not all going great. That does not feel like real celebration to me. We're talking about the real celebration moments. And this is huge because work has gotten a shitload harder. Because no one, it's not like, oh, in 2019, it's like cash money, everything's going great. This now like works hard, right? You don't have those motivations to do it. You really have to savor the moments, the successful moments that you're having with your team. Specific habits, ditch the performative celebrations, the email ones like, hello, executives, our team is rocking it. You can eliminate those. I mean, maybe just send it just to them. If you send it to the team, they feel terrible. They're like, we're not completely rocking it, we're just kind of rocking it. Schedule a monthly celebration, just kind of unstructured time. And this is a huge one. Just reach out to someone you work with and say, I do this coaching internally, and they said, I'm loving my team. And I said, have you reached out to any person and said, thank you, I really like working with you. I'm really happy of the results we got. No. And then I thought about myself, and I was like, I have not done that in the last 2 weeks. So I sent out these messages and thanked people of how productive and like how happy I was to work on that, how good it felt. And they wrote back, and they're like, and I felt that too. That's great that you're talking about that. So these things go a long way. And then finally, that time machine exercise, you really should put your wins in like message in a bottle and mail them to you. Now schedule in Slack or schedule the email. You can be like, send it to me at a random date when everything's going to shit, and you can remind it how awesome this time was when we did it. These are things you can do right now. Okay, the 3 things that make this tough is you probably have like 1 or 2% of people's brains left in most companies. The cognitive load is super, super high. The second thing is that there's diverse motivations. You think, you'll go, I always fell for this trap. Like, hey, shouldn't we try this? And a person says, yeah, that sounds great. And in 4 weeks, they didn't care, apparently. But people's motivations vary a lot, and a lot of luck is involved to make this work. Even the best ideas. I remember one thing I did at this company, Appfolio, is I finally was like, I'm going to go and print this thing and paste it in the bathrooms. That was my hack. And that was it. That was the thing. Everyone's like, I love that. And I think they did that for years later. They're like, we love that practice to do the things. And it took me failing a bunch of times to think, I'm going to paste it in the toilets to be able to do those things. Let's go through some of the blockers and get to it. The first is subtract and hack. In most of these cases, people are saying, I've got this great idea. In addition to the 40 to 80 hours you already work, we're going to do this new amazing process that I read about in this book. It's amazing. We're going to do team topologies. I'm just joking with this because, yes, it's awesome. But then you're like, well, who's going to run the workshop? Really? And then you start looking at the calendars and people are like, oh, wait, 8 weeks out? Can't I just read the book? Oh, my God. So the first thing is I've made a rule, subtract for every new habit. The other day, we eliminated a meeting that cost people 2,000 hours a year. Boom. Then I knew that I had the leverage to go in and say, why don't you try this other thing that would be effective? The hack thing is what we discussed before. No one is going to fire you for going in and adding that item. Celebrate hitting 2,500 active users in addition to discussing these things. So hack existing meetings, existing structures versus trying to do all new things can be super important. The next one is solitude. I think this is a huge thing that's impacting companies where there's a lot of talk about solo habits like, okay, when everyone's ready, go and add your lines to the doc. And you kind of see people get in the doc and you see their little avatars in there and you're like, it's very, very lonely. There's a lot of solitary habits that we're creating in companies just due to async work or remote work. You cannot underestimate the value of engaging the social network within your company to encourage these things. Like, have you ever been to a hotel and you saw the towel thing and they said 80% of customers do not use different towels every day? Well, you go and you start to, you reuse your towels, or you're in a study group, or you're in an exercise class, or all these things. Making these things social really, really, really help. So anytime you can get multiple people together to do it is a bonus. And I think the final thing is, yes, it's real work. A lot of these interesting practices and interesting habits, people treat them as these New Year's product resolutions, and they say, we're going to try this thing about sitting in the support queue. And then you say, well, can you show me everyone's performance reviews? Can you show me how many people actually motivated to do that? Nothing. And meanwhile, so the reality is in most companies, this sort of we ship X, we ship Y, and you demonstrated impact here and didn't. That takes up a majority of the things. But I would say it's amazing what you can do if you're a leader in the audience and you add one line into your leveling or whatever you're doing that says, engages the team in like productive celebration. Like, we should savor our wins, and I want to see that from you, engineering manager, or I want to see that. I used to be pretty like, no, it's not just incentives, because there's a lot more to it. But it's pretty important to do these things. Okay, so in the last 2 minutes, this is the moment you've all waited for. So is someone going to do it? Someone volunteers, let it out. Ready? Can someone delete? If I could get one person to lead a standing meeting, that's all that counts. Maybe even two, maybe even one or two. Let's make it a social activity, a social pressure now. One standing meeting. One. Can I just get one person to do it? One meeting. One. Shout out when you've done it. Come on. One meeting. You did it. Did you? Yes. Okay. Oh, two. Oh, we got those things. Good. I realize now that you're on this like fancy trip to go to a conference, it's probably not the best time to be like canceling all 35 instances of watermelon chart, meeting 5, inspect the orange items. But you get the idea. This is something you can do later. I really appreciate chatting with you about this stuff. Really, the message here is we're just awash in frameworks and awash in people telling you how you must work to be good at this. And when you boil it back and you're dealing with people, what we are doing on a day-to-day basis is probably the real indicator. The actions that we're taking in our environments are the super powerful things, and that's what you should try to make happen. Thank you so much.